For years, it's felt like this huge standoff, right? You've got the old guard, traditional banking on one side, and on the other, you've got this disruptive, super fast-moving world of crypto. It honestly seemed like they'd be stuck like this forever. But then, almost out of nowhere, a truce was called. So, let's dive into this huge, game-changing agreement that just might have ended crypto's Cold War for good.
And that quote right there, it pretty much sums up everything we're going to talk about. Because this isn't just some minor regulatory update. No, what we're looking at is a fundamental breakthrough in a really high-stakes conflict that has paralyzed progress for months, maybe even years. A conflict with literally trillions of dollars on the line.
So, what was this whole Cold War about anyway? Well, it all came down to one thing: stablecoins. More specifically, the crazy high interest rates or yields they could offer. I mean, this single issue was so toxic that it completely stalled a massive piece of legislation called the Clarity Act, and it just left the entire industry stuck in limbo.
And here are the specifics of this breakthrough. On March 20th, 2026, a bipartisan deal was struck between Senators Tom Tillis and Angela Alsobrooks. And their goal? It was pretty simple, actually. Find a compromise on this whole stablecoin yield thing that both the banks and the crypto world could actually live with. And by doing that, they could finally get the Clarity Act moving again.
Okay, but to really get why this was such a big deal, you've got to understand what the banks were so afraid of. We need to talk about the core fear that really felt like an existential threat to their entire business model.
That's the number, trillions, with a T. That is the sheer scale of the money that banks were absolutely terrified was just going to walk right out of their savings accounts and pour into the world of crypto. And you know what? They had a very, very good reason to be scared.
And there's a name for that fear: deposit flight. I mean, think about it from your perspective. Why would you keep your savings in a bank account that's earning you practically nothing when you could just hold a dollar-pegged stablecoin and earn, say, 4 or 5% interest? The banks saw this as completely unfair competition that could literally drain their deposits and totally destabilize their operations.
So, with trillions of dollars hanging in the balance, how on earth do you solve what looks like an impossible problem? Well, you get clever. The solution that finally broke the deadlock wasn't some outright ban, but a really specific and, honestly, pretty elegant new rule.
This new rule makes a crucial and really fascinating distinction. What's now banned is what they call passive yield. So you can no longer get paid interest just for letting stablecoins sit in your account, because, well, that looks and smells way too much like a bank account. But what is allowed are activity-based rewards. These are incentives you earn for actually using your crypto for things like making payments or transferring funds.
Okay, so what does this actually mean for you, the user? Well, those really popular programs, like the 4% APY that Coinbase used to offer just for holding on to USDC, those are done. They're over. Instead, what you should expect to see are things like reward tasks. So, for example, an exchange might offer you a 4% reward for a month if you make a certain number of transfers. See the difference? It's a subtle but absolutely critical shift from earning on savings to earning on usage.
All right, so the rules for stablecoin yield have changed. Big deal, right? Well, yeah, it's a huge deal. The consequences of this truce are massive, and they're sending ripple effects across the entire crypto ecosystem. Believe me, this is about a whole lot more than just interest payments.
And this timeline, man, it just shows you how fast everything is suddenly picking up speed. Back in January, the Clarity Act was completely dead in the water. Then, on March 17th, you get this landmark ruling declaring that ETH and Solana are commodities, not securities. Just 3 days later, boom, this stablecoin agreement is reached. The momentum is just undeniable, and it's all rocketing towards a critical vote in late April.
So this combination of events is like a massive tailwind for major platforms like Ethereum and Solana. And here's why. First, with regulated stablecoins, huge financial institutions finally get the green light they've been waiting for to start using these networks for settlement. Second, their official status as commodities removes that constant legal threat from the SEC hanging over their heads. And finally, as all this regulatory fear starts to just melt away, the risk premium on the entire sector begins to evaporate.
But, this compromise doesn't hit everyone the same way. Not at all. A centralized exchange like Coinbase, for instance, has to completely pivot its strategy. They have to turn their whole USDC rewards program into something activity-based. Meanwhile, a decentralized exchange on Solana like Jupiter is in a totally different boat. It can lean into Solana native yields. We're talking about things like staking rewards that are generated on the blockchain itself, which aren't affected by this stablecoin deal. It really just highlights the growing split in the ecosystem.
But, and this is a big but, this historic agreement is not yet law. And just as all this momentum is building, it has one final, very powerful enemy to defeat: the political calendar. The clock is officially and loudly ticking.
So, what are the odds? Prediction markets, which are often a pretty good gauge of these political wins, are feeling optimistic. They're putting the chance of this bill passing somewhere between 63 and 72%. But hey, that still leaves a pretty significant chance of failure. It's likely, for sure, but it is far from a done deal.
Okay, so here's the tightrope they have to walk to get this thing passed. First, the bill has got to clear its committee vote in late April. That's step one. Then, it needs to get a full Senate floor vote, and they're hoping that happens in May. And here's the crucial part. If it slips past June, the 2026 midterm election cycle is going to kick into high gear and all focus will shift to campaigning. This bill's window of opportunity is incredibly tight.
And that leaves us with the big cliffhanger question. After all the fighting, after the long stalemate, and after this brilliant compromise, does this bill actually have what it takes to win the race against time?
At the end of the day, here's the big takeaway. Whether this specific bill passes in the next couple of months or not, the truce has been called. This compromise signals a brand new era. It's a clear sign that the entire conversation is shifted. The question really isn't if crypto and traditional finance will integrate anymore, it's about how they'll do it and what that new landscape is ultimately going to look like.